So probably the best advice I've gotten is from Miya Kazuki. Her advice for writing was basically plot the start all the way to the end, effectively. Not necessarily set in stone, not every single path, but have the milestones. And that's definitely what I've been trying to follow with my story. Like, I know the ending, and I know the major story beats that need to be hit to reach that ending. But between those story beats and things like that, like, I'm willing to pants between those story beats as long as I reach that milestone. It's a good balance of, like, pantsing and plotting.
This is the CritRPG Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything LitRPG, progression fantasy, and Royal Road. Hi everyone, and welcome to the CritRPG Podcast, the only podcast that invites slimy people. With me today is Lunadea, who's the author of Sil, a monster slime evolution LitRPG. Did I get this right? Yeah, a slime monster evolution LitRPG. God damn it. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and yourself?
Thank you. I'm also doing good. It is nice of you to ask. All right. Without further ado, tell me about Sil and why should I read it?
So, if you want to have a zany adventure with a slightly neurotic slime that goes around eating things, growing stronger, and making friends along the way, then this is the story for you. where it's a system where I tack on multiple things onto it when I'm like, this is a cool idea, let me throw this on. And it's like a house of cards that keeps building. And then I'm like, I really shouldn't have done this, but it's too fun not to.
Oh God, yeah. If you never do a dev edit, because if you do, it's a fucking Jenga puzzle.
It's great. And I showed other authors sometimes like my notes for like powers and things like that, and I think I had a heart attack. Witness.
You have notes?
I have tabs in Notepad++ with like one word descriptions.
Look, good.
Yes.
Okay. So slightly neurotic is definitely a marker. But tell me, like, why and how did this book come to be?
So the why would be, I've always loved like monster stories, things like that. Ever since like in games, things like that, I've never really, this is going to sound weird, but I really hate like humans as an option and things like that. Like if there's a game and they'll let me play an orc, an elf, literally anything other than human, I pick the non-human option. I used to play like D&D 3.5 and things like that, like avidly in the day, and I was quite a Munchkin min-maxer. And if a Munchkin build needed you to play a human for the extra feat, I would not play that build because I did not want to play I did not want to play a human. So I've always loved like non-human stories, things like that. Famously, like my utterly favorite one is Soma Spider Kumiko. It's like I think like the quintessential like monster story. To like anyone that wants to like get into like monster stories should read that. And that's like my favorite thing ever. Soma Spider, So What?
Ah, okay.
Yeah. It's it fans and everyone just calls it Kumiko, and if you search Kumiko, you get it. It's a Japanese light novel. Got a manga, a web novel, and a light novel, a light novel, and it's even got a rather poorly animated anime.
Awesome. Poorly animated animes are the best. Okay.
So sad because like the first few episodes are like really good, and then after that, like you can see where the train, like the budget ran out and the train went off the tracks, and you're like, oh no.
Oh no. No.
So yeah, like I've always been a fan of like anything that's like not human and things like that. And when I quit my last job, I was on 2 months of waiting for my non-compete clause to expire. I had a lot of free time.
Oh, those are fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Wait, you got fired, and then you still hadn't had a non-compete?
No, I quit the company.
Oh, okay.
I was like really upset with the company, and they were like dragging me on, promising me promotion, things like that, and it just never happened. So I was like, well, I'm leaving. And they're like, just remember, you've got a non-compete clause. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I spent 2 months reading literally like every single like story, like non-human story that there was, and then I ran out of stuff to read, and I was like, oh no. Yeah, and then I was like, well, I've always really kind of liked slimes. It's like a classic like JRPG trope and things like that, and any anime there's like slime monsters, and they've got transformations or shape shifting or power absorption, things like that. So it's like always been like a really interesting type of like monster. So I was like, oh, I really want to read and I really, really wanted to read a slime story. And you might know there's a very famous slime story, Reincarnated as a Slime. It's like one of the top animes, light novels, like I think like almost in the world, like I'd say. It's like insanely popular. And I'd just come off reading Kumiko, and which is like still to this day like one of my favorite novels. And unlike Kumiko, which is basically a LitRPG JRPG adventure, Reincarnated Slime is not that. It's effectively someone playing Civilization, and it's not what I wanted to read as a story. So I was contrary to popular belief, because everyone thinks, oh, I must have been really inspired by like So I'm a Slime. I'm like, actually the opposite. I kind of bounced off it extremely hard. I watched 2 episodes. I was like, this is not what I wanted, and then I was like quite disheartened. And that led me to discovering Royal Road, and then I was like, oh, there's all these. I like never knew there was like an amateur English. I don't even know if I could call it amateur at this point now, but I didn't know there was like an English version of what like Japan and China and things like that do with their. I mean,
English version of Japan.
Well, what I mean is like I didn't realize like that kind of like pipeline existed, because it's quite a big pipeline in Japan with like you know, you write your web novel and then suddenly it gets picked up, and then suddenly you've got a manga and you've got a light novel, you've got an anime, like, you know, it's a insane pipeline industry that they've built there. And I didn't think, I don't know why I did this, but I always assumed like there's probably not some equivalent to that, and
because none of it has come out yet. If you're looking at the stuff that we have going right now, like Cradle doesn't have a comic yet. Right? We don't, like, there is no comic. Primal Hunter, like, unfortunately got really shafted over by like some stuff that happened. So I don't think Zolgar is super happy about that. I haven't talked to him about it, but I don't know. And like all the others, like, what big ones are there? Like He Who Fights with Monsters, like, still doesn't have a comic. They've kind of like, I don't know what happened there. And so many of these things have been like started, but they haven't come to fruition yet, and they haven't hit the mainstream yet. This is why you still see, except for like Vox Machina or whatever, all the stuff that you see on Netflix and so on and so forth, all Japanese, Korean, right, Chinese. I think in the coming years we're gonna see a lot more. Like, we're gonna see a lot more of this pipeline. But we're 10 years behind Korea. We always are. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a movement in that. I mean, like, I know Melas has like launched 2 comics now. Like, I know Salvos has got its own comic, and I know Amelia's also now recently got one. So there's stuff building.
Amelia actually hit like trending or trending best rated rank 7 on Webtoon, which is pretty impressive.
That is crazy.
And like we've recently launched a practical guide to evil. So that also hit like super hard. So we'll see how that goes.
So yeah, I discovered Royal Road accidentally because when I left the job, the people that liked me, they gave me an Amazon gift card just to like say like, thank you for the hard work, you know. Sorry it came out that way. And I was like, well, what am I going to spend this Amazon gift card on? And I spent it on a Kindle Unlimited subscription, and I started devouring everything I could find on Kindle Unlimited. And somebody recommended Salvos to me as a monster story. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see what Western people do for monster RPGs. Because as far as I knew, it was only a Japan kind of thing. Like, I didn't really expect anybody in the West to really do like monster RPGs or anything like that. So yeah, I read Salvos. I enjoyed it. Somebody then recommended Chrysalis. So I read Chrysalis. And then I think at the end of one of the Chrysalis books, it was like, oh, this was originally on Royal Road. Follow the story on Royal Road. I'm like, what's Royal Road?
Oh, yeah.
I discovered Royal Road, and I was like, oh, there's all these other books here. And then, as I said, I had lots of free time, and I'm quite an insane reader. Like I read all of the Beneath the Dragoneye's Moons while having a full-time job. I read all 12 books in like less than a week. So I've got like quite an insane read speed. So I started devouring books on Royal Road, and then naturally I started looking for like, okay, let's see if there's any like monster stories. Let's see if there's any slime stories, and there were none. And there was like 2, and one was on a hiatus, and the other one I kind of felt like wasn't really that good. And I was like, well, you know,
people will be able to like Google that now.
I think it got taken down, so
yeah,
I think the author actually deleted it. So I was like, well, like slime's not popular. Like I know it's like really popular in Japan. It's a classic monster. It's like, okay. And then I kind of just was like, well, I've always had like a bit of a creative side, but I've never really like put like pen to paper, so to speak. And I kind of just felt like, okay, if it doesn't exist, I'll make it myself, kind of thing like that, you know? And I went in, this would more count for the late sector of like what I'd do differently, things like that. But so I won't mention that until then. But
okay.
Yeah, I looked up Royal Road. I read like one guide, which was like really bad. I opened my thing and I wrote like 1,500 words, and I posted my chapter. I said, cool, I've started writing.
But that's cool though.
And yeah, like, I just kept going, and I kept writing, and I'd literally write the chapter the day of and release it. And like, that's how my story started.
I started the same way. I just opened and I wrote something, and I like didn't publish for like half a year, and I published one chapter again, and it was like I didn't really care. I was like, hey, if I can get like 5 followers, I'm happy. I got 5 followers. I was happy, right? So
yeah, same.
Pretty good shit.
What is quite disappointing, like, and I guess why the reason I've also written the story is like I want there to be more monster stories, things like that. I feel like, and what quite upset me was when I was like looking for like monster stories, things like that. I don't know if it's still the case, but when I googled like Royal Road monster stories, things like that, there was quite one of the first posts that come up on like one of the Reddits or something like that is 3 of, I won't say the names, but there's like 3 of the biggest like monster authors saying, don't write a monster story.
Yeah.
To me, it was so discouraging. I'm like, but I want monster stories. I want to write a monster story. I want to read more monster stories. And here's 3 of the biggest ones saying, don't do it. And to me, that felt soul crushing. And I really wanted to write something at the time. I had the free time, but I basically felt like I'd ran out of books to read, as shocking as it sounds. And I literally I was like, okay, if they're saying monsters don't work, then I had another idea for a human golemancer like story. And I was like, okay, cool. If monsters don't work, I'll write that. And it literally came to like me opening my Google Docs, and like I was like about to like start writing the human golemancer story, and then I was just like, no, screw this. I want to write my slime story. Story.
Is that why you killed your main character in the first chapter?
No, I just knew I mean, it's like the classic, like, isekai. Like, most of my inspiration in writing style, like, comes from, like, all the Japanese light novels I've read and things like that. And almost all of them start with, like, your character's either dead or immediately dies.
Yeah, there was like some sort of like spiritual / like religious undertones that were to be made there. Someone mentioned that at some point. I think it was like Brandon Sanderson. But like, yeah, interesting. Okay. But okay, so yeah, you got your cut your teeth on these, and then obviously you started imitating them, right?
Yeah, I definitely say that I take more inspiration from like Japanese black novels than Western novels, things like that. Because I mean, hilariously, for the longest time, I thought probably because of my childhood and things like that. Like my childhood book series was Wheel of Time, which is maybe saying something. So I always had the impression of, if you need to be a writer, you need to describe your scenes, kind of like, like Robert Jordan describes the scenes. Like you need to describe everyone's clothing in immaculate detail. And so that's why I never ever wanted to get into writing, because I'm like, I can't do this. I can't describe the number of stitches in this person's clothes and things like that, Which is why when I swapped to Japanese light novels, things like that, and I'm like, they don't describe any of that, basically jump into the action. You know, you might get like a hair color of a person or something like that, or their name, and that's it. You know,
and
I was so refreshed.
You fill in the blanks. Yeah, they fill in the blanks. I feel as though that there's a tie or like a connection between the reading speed of a person and what they write. Not necessarily what they read, but what they write. Because I read like super fast for the longest time, like super fast. And I couldn't write a description for the life of me because that was the shit I always skipped. After I did my studies and I, had to like close read a lot of like Name of the Wind and all that kind of stuff. And I sat in class, this was about like some, I think it was like some sort of like, I think it was a chibi. Arrow of God, and they were talking about like some details. I was like, I didn't read. What are we talking about? That never happened. It's in the book. And I looked it up. I was like, it was actually in the book. I had just like skipped over it. I was like, fuck. So I had to force myself to read slowly, like way slower, and that actually impacted my writing style because now I am maybe a bit too introspective in my writing, but well, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, okay. I think we should move on to the next question, though, because now that you said that, hey, you were inspired by Japanese light novels and like your foundation in Robert Jordan, what's the best advice you've ever gotten as a writer?
So probably the best advice I've gotten is from Miya Kazuki. She's the author of Ascendance of a Bookworm, which is my actual #1 book series of all time. It's without a doubt my favorite. I would have said Wheel of Time was my favorite series, and that when I finished Ascendance of a Bookworm, it usurped it from my #1 spot, beating out even childhood nostalgia with rose-tinted goggles. But her advice for writing was basically plot the start all the way to the end, effectively. Not necessarily set in stone, not every single path, but have the milestones. And I feel like that's the best advice I've gotten, and that's definitely what I've been trying to follow with my story. Like, I know the ending, and I know the major story beats that need to be hit to reach that ending. But between those story beats and things like that, like, I'm willing to pants between those story beats as long as I reach that milestone. And sometimes while you're pantsing between those milestones, you might think like, oh, you might, like erect another milestone to like head towards, things like that,
Yeah.
But that's, in my opinion, is like really, it's a good balance of like pantsing and plotting.
I don't know why, but I tried that and the pacing was completely off. Completely off. Like either I'm way too fast because I want to get to the next milestone, or I write so many details in that now, because of all the details I mentioned, I have to actually somehow reconcile all of them into the story, and like now there's like a side plot. Oh no, oops, now there's 2 side plots. Oh no, fuck, there's 3 side plots. And I have to like resolve all of those because of like certain logical elements I had put into the story earlier. So how do you not do that?
It depends. I mean, sometimes it's just like a feeling. I guess maybe I've got really good intuition there when I'm like, okay, this plot has kind of like been going on a bit too long. I need to like move on. I'm not, because generally like I'll let myself be taken. Like I wrote like a small like little crafting arc where my slime goes and like wants to become an enchanter and I was like, oh, okay, this will be like maybe like 3 chapters, and it ended up being like 11 chapters. And it's hilariously, it's like one of my most loved arcs. Like it got the most positive ratings. People were like, wow, I loved this. More of this.
This is great. That's awesome. My entire like tutorial thing, right, was supposed to be 3 to 5 chapters. I am now 375,000 words in, and we still haven't gotten to that point, to the end of it. So it's actually gotten to the point where I had to like basically chop off the like 90% of the story and just make like getting from like the beginning of the tutorial to the end of the tutorial the main story. because like otherwise I would never finish this thing. Like the ratings aren't there, mostly because I've made some mistakes in the early chapters that I have tried to rectify, but really can't, not yet anyway. And like it's it's a lot of work went into the thing, and the whole derailing stuff, I still don't really know how I got into them and how I would get out. But in other stories I've written, like it's gotten way easier. Like I said, it's kind of like a feeling like, do we need this? Probably not. Leave it out. Chuck. There it goes. Right? But like, I don't know why, but in Torchbearer, I can just never do that.
It's definitely, I don't know. I don't know if it's just because I've read so many books that like now I can like maybe I'm like somehow like sensing the story beats or what, but like I had a dungeon arc and I was like, originally the dungeon was going to be like 4 or 5 levels, and around when they were on the second like floor of the dungeon, I was like, I need to actually start wrapping this up. It's kind of, even though like like I'm enjoying writing the fights and people are enjoying the fights, things like that, I don't feel like we're making much progress. We're kind of just turning our wheels there. And I cut it down to 3 floors, and I ended on like a really cool boss fight, and people loved it. And I'm like, okay, cool. People seem to like my intuition, I guess, with that. What you described, kind of like, you remind me almost like, I guess like the classic video game is like, okay, you must go into this house for the quest. And instead of going to the house, you explore the bush around the house. You then go explore the well in behind the house. You explore everything till detail before you finally go, okay, I'm ready to go into the house.
Why do I feel called out? I have no idea. Nah.
I'm the same in video games. So
it's
thankfully I'm not that way in writing. At least I feel, hopefully.
I don't know, like it's just this one book, by the way. All the others, I'm actually maybe a bit too fast because I want to get to the fun parts the entire time. Like I'm faster than Cradle in some parts, right? Wow. Which is already like pretty concise. But in that book, I have no idea why. I just have to go through all the details. And one thing that I've like recently learned through kind of like starting to really plot out all my stuff is like I plot down to the paragraph now. Is I have a way easier time to actually tell, like, no, this is too much. This is going to get us down a rabbit hole that I'm not going to get out of. And I think it's just experience. Like, it's really just experience.
Can a team of has-been teen idols save the world? Find out in the new series Boy Bands and Dragons. When Neverboyland is sucked into a magical world, their reunion takes a back seat to staying alive. But if they can get over the past drama that drove them apart, they may find that even pop stars can be heroes. Come and discover your new favorite read. Our comeback tour is Slaying Monsters, the first in the Boy Bands and Dragons series by Kim Smuga Otto, dropping on Kindle Unlimited, October 25th.
But speaking of experience, what's one thing that you've learned while writing that you would do differently now if you started all over again? Or that you will consider in future writing?
Having a backlog, because I had no backlog when I started writing. I literally was posting the chapters on the day and hitting submit as soon as the chapter was done. And it's crazy. I mean, if you've got the free time, and I guess you can get some like really, I can't even say like I got good like feedback initially, because I didn't start getting like comments until I was like 30 chapters in or something like that, really. So like people could like, it's not like I'm getting like instantaneous feedback, and I can like have my hand on the pulse to see like, are people enjoying this or not, you know? So having a backlog is something I definitely did. And when I get my second story, I'm almost thinking of taking the dad man approach, where I have like the full book ready before I even start like publishing it on Royal Rapid.
Oh yeah, that's like definitely the way to go if you want to do this professionally. Like, don't get me wrong, it is super good if you just want to like have some fun while writing and just write and like put the chapter up as soon as you're done with it. I did that with Band, and it worked like a fucking charm because it was so relaxing. You know, I would like dictate the entire thing, like fix the mistakes that the dictation software made, and put it up there, and I would be done with it. Like, and people like that story way more than the one where I like edit everything 3 times and like work through all the problems that I thought about. And like, if you just want to have fun, writing the day off and then posting the day off, or like skipping a day or whatever, like that's cool. Do that. And I feel you only really have to have a backlog and really keep churning out these chapters if your Patreon is your main source of income. That's like the one thing that you have to do, the backlog. And I think like I have never had any success on Patreon. Never. I just don't think I'm like a serial writer in that sense. So for you, if you want to write the entire book and then put it on Patreon while you're waiting for it to get published, like, yeah, sure, do that. Right? That makes sense. And I know for a fact that like Sean does it because he can, because he writes super fast. Like, let's be real. Like, if he writes like 10,000 words each day, he needs about 20 days for a novel, like a big novel.
Yeah, it's insane. But yeah, other things I'd do differently is I'd probably not write in the first person. And it's maybe controversial because I know Selkie says like, because I wrote Sil in the first person, it made the character more, you get more closer to the character and things like that. And so I know Selkie has said like, he really enjoys like how I've made like the connection to Sil and things like that, like while you're reading things like that. But I don't know, when I've written anything else in third person, I'm like, man, this is so much easier to write.
Well, that's okay though. I feel like first person, third person, even second person, if you really want to do that. By the way, I love writing in second person. It's so much fucking fun. But that's just a tool, right? And you probably should try all tools and see which one you like best, and then just do that.
I don't know if I'd give second person a try, but I did enjoy RavensDagger's story in second person.
Oh yeah, which one was that?
Lovecrafted, I think it is.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yes, I have to like read that still. Sounds really fun. I know it's in second person. I've written a second person story called The Flower, the Wish, and the Blood. That was like, it will never be on Railroad probably. It's a urban fantasy and it was like really bad. But the entire story is basically like the main character talking to someone else in a bar and explaining the entire story in first person. But then they interject stuff like, oh, by the way, like, you know that it happened this way, but at the time I thought I did, right? So like, this is technically second person. It can be cool, but you shouldn't overdo the conversational tone. You have to have some creative freedoms there.
Yeah, it's interesting what people manage to make work. Like there's a Zhanja story on Royal Road that I really like, and the person wrote the entire story in first person present tense, and it took me a while to get over the fact that it was in present tense, but like the story is good and I really enjoy it, and I'm like, this must be torture to write.
Oh, this is actually, I love first person present. Which one is that? Which story is that?
I'm gonna butcher the title. It's like Ave Xia Rem. It's he's taken like the first letters and it comes out to an average Xianxia harem story or something like that. And the hilarious part is that like there's no harem actually in the story. Like I don't know what he called that.
I mean, like same reason why Beware of Chicken was supposed to be a harem story and then it wasn't.
Yes, I loved Beware of Chicken.
Yeah, like he you know that he actually did want to write a harem story, right?
Yes, I watched your I watched the episode.
Okay, cool, yeah, dope. It was insane, but yeah, like first person present, it's so immediate. It's hard to read because you need to get into it, but it is very immediate, right? Because your brain can't really distinguish between yourself and what's written, because it's all in the same voice in your head, and so it gives you a certain amount of safety to write in third person, because I don't know, Lyndon punched the enemy really hard and the enemy died, right? Okay, cool. That's like, oh, that's exciting. We can like sit there and like see the story happen. But when it's like, I punch the enemy and I feel the sting in my hand, right? That is so intense and so intimate almost. And I feel there's a certain poetry to it. So at some point I'm going to do that. Torchbearer was actually supposed to be a first person present. But I don't know why I stopped doing that. I think it didn't really work all that well. But I will definitely do that at some point, and no one can stop me.
That's definitely, I mean, as I said, it took me a while to get into it, like reading it, like just because like I've never really read anything in present tense before like that. But once I was in it. I was like, okay, this is great. I don't think I do it myself because it's taken me, enough effort to make sure that I don't screw up my own tenses,
Second person finite past is where it's at. You would have walked over the... No.
Oh, thank you.
No, like that way lies like very, very bad fan fiction and like online role playing. Like, I don't know why people do that in online role playing. It's been like years since I did that, but at the time, every once in a while, you would have this one person that would describe everything they did in would sentences, in conditionals.
I also used to do forum role plays. There was a Harvest Moon forum RPG. I used to chat on that a lot, and then I was also used to do this really big like Naruto one where it used to roll. And that one was fun but frustrating because you'd be like role playing with someone, and then like some like random other person would be like, "I enter the scene and kill both of them," and you're like,
I'm gonna disregard that. Yeah, it's like the online role playing is wild because like at any point in time you might be interacting with like a master of the craft and or a kid with a power fetish. Like,
yes,
it is like wild. Why did you stop?
I got into video games, things like that. I mostly did it at the time because I didn't have video games at the time. So I was like, okay, posting on the forums is something fun to do.
Yeah. And then Steam happened.
Yes.
Like, I'm actually thinking about it. Like, I stopped role-playing in that sense, mostly because it was so hard to find people that could like keep together a coherent scene and not like have it like completely peter off, and at the same time also like know enough about writing to understand when not to drag on a scene or how to like describe something that makes sense and like be a bit verbose about it and put emotions into it. Like people with both of those skill sets are like exceedingly rare, and at the time I wasn't good. I wasn't like a great writer, but I'd done more writing than most people on those forums. And so it got a bit sad because like, I don't know, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was like, oh, it's great that this guy is here because like he writes really well. I'm super happy to play with him. And then like, I didn't really get as much out of it as I put into it,
Yeah.
So,
no, definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's like sometimes like you'll like write a cool thing and then the person's just like, okay. And you're like, well, thanks.
Yeah.
Insightful conversation.
Or like they write something and it's all declarative sentences and all like backstory and all like a lot of like stuff that you can't really interact with as the main character, or like as your character. And then suddenly like, what do you want me to do here? You just spouted like 50 lines of dialogue and like I wouldn't know how to answer. I was like, okay, sure. And like then you have the power gamers who like control your character, or like my biggest pet peeve is when people open several conversational threads or like several action threads in one post. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But like I do this and then I do this and then this, and it's like, well,
yeah.
And like my first action to your first action invalidates like half of the rest of your posts. So
yeah. Exactly, and then suddenly, like you have to like it's like a checkbox that you have to tick because you have all these three things at the same time. It's good for learning how to multitask, but it's also hard to write and enjoy that. So, yeah.
One thing I want to quickly, just before we move to fall, one thing I definitely do differently, and this is a bit of a question on your part as well. So. You're an author. Your character needs to fight monsters in a forest. What's one of the first forest monsters that comes to mind, other than a slime?
Spiders.
What about what if it needs to be a slightly like humanoid-ish monster?
Trolls.
Okay, so you didn't go for the two that most people do, but most people answer wolves and goblins as their like forest monster, like forest bestial monster, and a forest like humanoid monster. And
I do have wolves.
So I went with, my slime is going to be fighting wolves for the first thing. Turns out, if I'd watched more of that other slime anime, I would have found out, oh, he also fights wolves as one of his first things. And then I would have also found out, that the next thing he gets involved with is goblins. I had no idea. So I had quite a few people being like, oh, this is exactly like the slime anime. Thankfully, I had a bit of a twist that they weren't expecting. So I saved myself. But there's a few people that I lost initially that were like, oh, this guy's copying slime.
I mean, like, if every time the first enemy is like a rabbit, I will go like, oh, this guy is clearly copying you fight this monster. It's like, right? Like, there's only so many animals you can like pull out of your hat. No pun intended.
I'd probably keep. I mean, I enjoyed the wolves, and I had like a really cool boss fight with like the head of the wolf pack and things like that. So I wouldn't change that, but I'd probably immediately change goblins to like anything else, like kobolds or gnolls or literally. I wanted a weak humanoid-ish monster for my slime to interact with that wasn't humans to get like a different perspective of the world, kind of thing. Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Here's my first case of like a sentient life that isn't trying to kill me.
I mean, it could be worse. You could completely mischaracterize your character and like add a lot of backstory that doesn't even need to be there. So that could happen. That you could do that, and you would lose even more readers that way. I recently like reread that and was like, I made some choices I really shouldn't have. I thought that I needed to explain the entire backstory because people were like, I don't know what's going on. It's like, okay, cool, I'm gonna explain it. They were like, no, it's too much explanation. I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? The main issue wasn't that like there was too much explanation or not enough explanation or whatever. It was that the main character's motivations weren't clear. Like, why is she doing what she's doing? So if that's not there, and also they're not super proactive, then people get like really upset and they will tell you weird things that make no sense. But to them, they kind of does and doesn't. Anyway, good point on the goblins. I didn't even think about that. Like, yeah, it's mostly goblins. But yeah, wolves and goblins. Yeah. I got spiders, then a wolf, and then rats.
Yeah, in my side project, I was like, "Oh crap, it's another forest." So I'm like, "No, what can I do that's not wolves?" And then I ended up using direhawks.
Ooh, that's nice.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Oh, it went very well. The few people that have beta read it are really happy with the choice.
Nice. Okay, but now, what's one book that you love and why is it awesome?
It would have to be Ascendance of the Bookworm.
Okay.
It's just such a fantastic story. It's 33 books long, not including side stories, so it's long. But it is a Japanese light novel, so it's short. I guess shorter than I say it's shorter than the average like LitRPG book or things like that. But in terms of like light novel content, it's longer than normal light novels, so it's a bit of a in between. But it's such a. I don't think I've read something so consistent. So there are seeds planted literally within like the first chapter that like come to fruition like 20 books later, and you're like, oh no. Like, it's reading it the first time was enjoyable. Rereading it was like mind blowing. I was like, this is like the best author ever in my opinion, like when I read it.
Yeah, I like it when there's like callbacks to the very first chapter and stuff like that. I really like that.
This was insane. This is like this person was like planting seeds and like constantly, and then like 10 books later you're like, it's time to like harvest, and you're like, oh wow. Everything is just paying off. And had
so many guns, Mr. Chekhov.
It's crazy because like, and it starts so unassuming, and like it's a story about a girl that dies and she into a world where she presumes there's no books, and she just wants to find books and read books because she loves books, and that is literally her motivation, basically. And it starts off in such a small world where like she's trying to like make paper or like make like clay tablets, so she can like write on like, and she like has to like learn writing and things like that. And so it starts off so small, and then it grows, and like almost like majority of like the first book is like almost like within like the four corners of her house because she's like a sickly girl. And then like the next book like expands, and like, oh no, she's like now like interacting with like her neighborhood, and then like expands again. It's like, oh, she's interacting with like the lower district of the city. And then like suddenly it's like she's, you know, it's like the scope of the world kept like expanding and expanding,
but in
a
very, very slow pace. I like that.
I'd definitely say it's slow, but like when the pop-offs happen, it's fast, and you're like, wow.
Yeah. But
the jet boosters are on.
I like it when it's like when there's a certain sense of progression of scale as well, right? It's nice because it's kind of predictable, but also not, because you never know what's out there. Like it's a bit of the old like uncovering the fog kind of thing. Speaking of which, like Seth Ring did something like that. It's called Dreamer's Throne, where the main character literally like he can't walk, but he can explore the city in his dreams, and he can like through a mechanic basically increase his scope of influence. I really liked the system. I really liked the story too. This was really cool. Like it's a bit of like a gang builder in there too, a little bit of crime, a little bit down and gritty, with a protagonist who has like very clear goals, very clear motivations, and is very scrupulous. But at the same time, also like he's literally missing an arm and can't walk. So it's good. I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best things Seth has ever written. But yeah, like I like the uncovering thing. I like the slow expansion stuff. And thank you for recommending that book. Is it out in English?
Yes, it is. It's fully the final book finally got like fully translated like 4 months ago.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. And it's like professional translation or like machine or whatever?
Professional translation. It was licensed by J Novel Club.
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
So it's fully English translated. The translator did an amazing job and things like that. There's like some great like translator notes like afterwards and things like that, and
I like those.
It's genuinely like amazing.
Okay. Well, while we're at it, why don't you give us some shout outs?
Yeah, so I would definitely want to shout out Ellake, the author of Ruinous Return. He's also with Mango Media, but he's been very supportive with me. Like anytime I've like got questions, things like that, I can reach out to him and I chat with him. SerasStreams, author of Ruinous Return, is also recently joined Mango, and is also just like
wait. You said the same book twice.
Did
because I was like, I know Saras wrote Ruinous Return. What did the other one write?
Oh, sorry, a Runic artist.
Okay, Runic artist, yeah.
Ellake wrote a Runic artist, yeah, sorry. And then SerasStreams wrote Ruinous Return, and like I was like, oh, I'm writing this beta story, and then it was like, oh, can I read it? And I'm like, sure. And I'm basically getting like free line editing on all my beta readings, which is because Seras loves the story that much, so it's pretty awesome. And then I definitely want to give shout outs to some of the monster authors because I want more people to write monster stories. I enjoy reading them, and I want more people to, read them and write them. So I'm kind of a bit hopeful that I guess maybe if my not to be too like pie in the sky dream thing, but if my own book kind of like does pretty decently on Amazon, then I kind of hope it'll at least remove some of the stigma, because I wrote my book because I want to read. I want them to be more, and I hated that there's this negative stigma of, oh no, you write a monster story and then it doesn't do well on Amazon. Yeah.
Amazon's readership is completely different from Royal Road readership. Like there's like very little overlap, ironically. So I mean, here's the hoping. I really do hope that it's going to like land well, because the RPG space could always use more diversity in topics and themes.
It's weird because like you'd think there'd be some bit of translation, because like it's clear that like there are people like myself that want to read monster stories and things like that. You know, the fact that my story on Royal Road hit like 10K followers yesterday, like I think that's evident that there are people that want to read monster stories. And if you look at all the monster stories, they're all sitting at like almost like this like minimum threshold, I'd say. Like a lot of them are sitting at like at least like unless they're like really like just like badly written, but like there's almost like this minimum threshold of like almost all monster stories are sitting at like 2K, 3K, 4K.
It's very hit and miss. It's a bit of like a survivor's bias. I'm sorry, but if you're writing a monster RPG, like either you completely crash and burn, or the story is just like that good that it gets to 10K. And there's always people who are going to say like, hey, if that had been a human MC, like it might have been even more or even less.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, right? But I do think that some systems and some stories can just be written as like a monster MC. I mean, like Merchant Crab's still one of my favorite stories because it's heartwarming and like very cute, and you can't do that with like a human MC, like because it wouldn't even work. This kind of like mix of character, like very cantankerous, but also at the same time very hungry for pie and like kind of nice. Like you can't do that with a human MC without making them look completely like crazy or weird. So I think that there's something to be said about monster MCs.
There's a lot of like areas you can't explore. Like there's a really, really good dragon story. Unfortunately, the author went on permanent hiatus, so it's never getting updated. But I love the story, and the author wrote this entire system of like the dragon girl like gains power based on like the size of her like horde and how many minions she has under her control and things like that. And it's like you can't. I mean, imagine if you're having a human NPC and it's like, oh, my power is based on my horde size, and like, yes, you could do that, but it wouldn't really fit thematically. You know, it would only fit in a dragon.
That brings me back to one of the favorite stories that I will probably never write, because like, or write a Discord, shared the idea, and that is Isekai with an S tier dong : a guide to digging around in Fantasyland. And obviously, you would measure like how strong you are by like your dick size, like obviously. So, like that doesn't work without it being like completely hilarious. Like because even with it was like horde size. But then again, there are merchant LitRPGs where the amount of like assets that you have and the amount of money that you have definitely scale you up in power, like for sure. Corpo Age, I think, is one of them.
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, there's those themes and things like that, and
you can let your main character get away with a lot of like very interesting quirks that you can't do with a human character. Like if you have a human character who's like really likes gold, like that's really weird, dude. But if it's a dragon, it's fine.
Plus, like evolutions and things like that. Like I don't know, for me that gets the neurons firing. Like sure you get like class ups or like job ups or whatever you want to call it, but I don't know. For me, when it's like, okay, cool, the monster's like evolving or whatever, like that triggers something in my brain.
Have you read this Cobalt Evolution LitRPG? I forgot which one it was. I think Peter Lee wrote that. So he's written like Dear Spellbook, but no, probably was that really like, no, I don't know. Like there's an author that I've had on the podcast who's written a Monster Evolution LitRPG about a kobold who really wants to be a dragon. And I don't know who it was. I forgot. But that sounded really cool, and I really wanted to get into that. So maybe that's something that you might enjoy too. A Dream of Wings and Flame.
It's added to my list.
But yeah, okay. Sorry, I rudely interrupted you in the shoutouts. So go ahead. Oh, yeah, it's by Coco.
I've added it to my list. My own horde of books grows.
Nice. You mean like it's a mix between like Dragon LitRPG and Ascendance of the Bookworm. The other one that I wanted to recommend, I think, was Claws Out by Sean Oswald, I think. It's also like a dragon main character. Vaynkur is also cool, even though like Vaynkur doesn't really do all that much.
Yeah, I enjoyed the first book a lot.
Yeah, and I think there was like one more. I'll tell you after in the bonus material or something. But yeah, I think this brings us to the end of the podcast.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to shout out the monsters stories.
No, you won't. Go ahead.
So the first one is Undersea Reincarnation. It's an octopus monster evolution, written by Kel Crescent. Although recently he's abandoned his ways and he's written a extremely successful human system apocalypse story. But yes, his octopus story is really fun. And underwater, there's a theme I think not many RPGs and things like that have explored enough. I think it's untapped potential, personally. Yeah. The other one is a Dragoneye by Mango. It's a monster evolution progression as well. Great person. Also helps me with ideas, and also another one of my beta readers that pokes me to, and also my sprint companion. So like helps me a lot with sprints and getting my word counts out. And then the final one is Reborn as a Demon Hat by Iron Lung.
Ooh.
And it has probably the sickest looking cover you'll ever see. It's something out of like Nightmare Before Christmas. It looks so amazing.
Yes, it does. I like the red eye. Nice. Well, thank you very much. Now, though, I think we've reached the end of the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being here. I mean, we're going to keep talking after this, and we'll like continue on the bonus material. Well, maybe not today, but tomorrow, because I'm feeling a little bit out of it. But again, thanks for being here. And if you guys want to listen to more of Lunadea and I talk, then yeah, you can check out our Patreon. It's right below the podcast. Well, that being said, any last words?
Please check out my book on Amazon, and at the time it's for us it's releasing tomorrow, but for when this podcast comes out, it'll be out in Amazon and Audible. So please look up Soul and give some love to the monsters.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time. And if you're on Patreon, the show goes on in one way or another.